Welcome to Autoimmune Secrets. I'm your host, Jonathan Otto. In our first episode, we went through an overview of autoimmune disorders in general. Today, we'd like to look into more specific issues such as lupus, arthritis, and thyroid conditions. Often, many of these conditions appear simultaneously. One contributes to the other. So if we get down to the root cause and understand the true source of these symptoms, then we can really begin to tackle the problem and find hope for recovery. Now, if you're enjoying this series, if you're loving it, then make the decision today to own this series. When you own the series, then you're able to share it with loved ones for a lifetime to come. And there's many people that you've probably been thinking about during the whole series and thinking, this would be really good for that person and that person. If only that person could hear this. Well, they can hear about it, and it's through you. And by owning this resource, you can share it with them. We give even another free buddy pass as a bonus, so another friend can get full access to what we're offering there, and a very special discount during the time that this is airing. So just make the decision today so you can secure that with all the bonuses and support our mission, but most importantly, support your health and the health of your loved ones for a lifetime to come with resources that change and save lives. And Autoimmune Secrets is that resource. Thank you so much. Let's dive into the rest of this episode.
The thyroid is gaining a lot of attention. There's doctors out there like Dr. Barnes, who says that 90%, this is huge, 90% of men and women in America have subclinical hypothyroid, meaning they're actually exhibiting some symptoms, but they don't know that there's actually lower functioning thyroid. 90%. And then of that 90%, majority of those are women, 80 to 90% are mostly women, and of those, 80 or 90% of those are autoimmune. So when you start extrapolating that, it's like, okay, a ton of people have thyroid issues. Most of them are women, and a lot of it's autoimmune. It's like, the stats seem pretty high, but I think the foundation really allows us to look at and say, okay, thyroid's a big deal right now in our society. Thyroid's a big issue in our country, really across the globe. Thyroid's big for, basically your metabolism, your energy level, hair, skin. There's so many things that it actually plays a role with. So oftentimes, thyroid will show people that can't lose weight, hormonally related. Thyroid can be affected with that. Then you have this other classification of the, chronically ill and they're underweight and they're worried, I can't fast or I can't do anything because I don't want to lose more weight. So you have this spectrum, and thyroid fits really into that niche. So how do you know if you have a thyroid disease or a thyroid condition? You can simply go and get some blood work done and get tested for it. Now there are signs and symptoms. The face is really a great place to look at signs and symptoms. If you're missing the outer third of your eyebrows, thyroid type symptom, that's a nice one to look at. But when you go in, you can have some blood work done. Blood work, the standard blood work that they run is TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, which when I look at that, I'm like, wait a minute, the TSH isn't even produced by the thyroid. So some doctors will only use TSH as a marker for thyroid, but it's actually not even produced by the thyroid. That's very interesting. So TSH is basically produced by the pituitary in the brain to then signal to the thyroid, hey, do something, go do some work, go produce hormones, T4, T3. So your thyroid produces T4, and then it will produce a small amount of T3. Majority though of the T4 will get converted to T3 in the liver. So when we're looking at thyroid, it's not just about the thyroid. So often I see clinically that the liver is actually a fundamental issue of why people have thyroid problems, that they can't convert T4 to T3. So fixing the liver is a big thing, and we can get into more of that. But when you're running blood work, you want to look at TSH, you want to look at T4 and T3, and there's two different types. There's free, F-R-E-E, and then also total. So free T3, free T4, total T4, total T3, and then you're looking again TSH. You want to look at reverse T3, that goes high typically in chronic infection or bodies chronically stressed out, so reverse T3. And then the other two things you want to look at are antibodies like TG, TPO antibodies. And if the antibodies are high, then that usually signals autoimmunity. But so what I think about with my wife, when she was pregnant with my daughter, started having some heart palpitations. This was either the second or third, beginning of third trimester, started having some issues, and we're like, oh my gosh, like, what are we gonna do? There's a baby inside you. Went in, got tested, came up Hashimoto's, antibodies for thyroid were elevated. We're like, oh great, now we have an autoimmune condition going on. And then she actually had an ultrasound done on her thyroid that showed nodules as well. So there's multiple things that you can do to look at it, but I think if you just run a complete thyroid panel, that's a good foundation.
So in my case, I got my first autoimmune condition when I was 14. Spent the first half of my 20s chasing a condition, being told it was all in my head, and my second half of my 20s collecting disease labels. So I had 6 autoimmune conditions by 30. I was heavily medicated. And after 10 years of being sick, my doctor's team told me that they had great news, and then proceeded to tell me that I wasn't going to die in the immediate future. I was a CEO for a company at the time, and I thought to myself, if I went to my board of advisors and told them we're not going to go bankrupt in the immediate future, I don't think I have a job. So I said, what are we going to do about my process? And I was told that that was not what they were doing, and they were happy with my numbers. I'm an economist by training and a little autistic with numbers. So to me, that just didn't cut it. I was seeing like these numbers for the last years in my head, and I was like, wow. And of course, I didn't think I was going to be able to change anything, but I was so disempowered as a patient that I went home and I turned to the one thing that I'd always kind of been able to rely on, which was numbers. And it was pre-apps and it was pre-quantified self and all these things. And I started charting everything that I did. And at night I would put it into Excel spreadsheets. I built an algorithm, and basically from looking at correlations between what I did and my symptoms, I proved in 5 months that I wasn't a cardiac patient. And then proceeded to think, well, if I could get rid of my first label, I can probably get rid of everything. And it took me 16 months in total, but I basically tinkered my way, or hypothesis tested my way out of all of my conditions, got off my Humira, got off the different drugs, and basically was able to normalize my blood work. And here we are 6 years later. I've not taken any drugs, and I'm perfectly fine and happy, and probably healthier in my 40s than I was in my 20s. Well, it was funny, every time I go into a meeting, my COO says, mention that grandmother. And it's a woman that was so sick when we started seeing her that her husband took the first 2 appointments. I don't know if you've ever gone over someone else's bowel movement with a practitioner, but it was pretty weird. And at the same time, he was so informed that I thought, wow, he's really been, helping her out at a very intimate level, because otherwise he wouldn't know all the stuff that he knows. And then 10 weeks later, when I called her for a follow-up, she was winded when she picked up the phone, and she said, can I call you back in 5 minutes? And I double-checked the list like 3 or 4 times, because I was like, that cannot be the same woman. And by the time she called me back, I said, so how are you feeling? And she goes, oh great, I was taking care of my grandsons. And I thought to myself, wow, it's like amazing that you can see these turnarounds in people's lives. And in her case, it was very, very basic. And I think that's what we're seeing over and over. It's very basic interventions.
So tell me what she was experiencing. So she was so sick, she was not able to come to the appointment, right?
Yeah.
And so, what was she experiencing?
So in her case,
what was her disease?
She has lupus. We're focusing a lot on lupus. She had occurred 4 strokes. She had gone through a lot of different, pre-diabetes, whatever. It's always, by the time I see people, they always have at least 4 different diagnoses. But I think in her particular case, and what we see quite a lot, when people have a lot of medications, they stop eating as much. They don't hydrate, or if they hydrate, they do it with sugary liquids. And there was just a lot of bad lifestyle behavior that went into producing these symptoms. And when she started working with us, her goal was to cook a meal for her family once a week. And I said to her, no, this is blue sky. You can, tell me anything that you want to get out of this program. And she said, well, it's been so long since I've been able to do that for me that would actually be a huge accomplishment. And 6 weeks later, no, actually not 6, 10 weeks later, she was babysitting her grandsons. And of course she was exhausted. Who wouldn't be? But at the same time, she was able to do it. This woman will never get back to the workforce, but it also doesn't matter, because she's going to be able to be there for her family and for her grandsons, which is going to make a huge change in their world.
Learning is all a part of the autoimmune journey. Educating yourself on autoimmune disease in general, as well as your specific condition, helps you to become a more savvy, informed patient who can best advocate for yourself during a healthcare appointment. Since we aren't ignoring conventional medicine or your doctor's advice, this is incredibly important as it helps you to be proactive and guide the medical side of treating your autoimmune disease.
Right? So when we look at the progenesis, where does rheumatoid arthritis come from? There's this concept, Jonathan, called molecular mimicry. Okay, molecular mimicry means when the gut is leaking. So think of your gut, it's a quarantine zone. The gut is a tube and it's supposed to keep bad things out and let good things in. What happens with molecular mimicry is that the gut is sprung holes. There's microscopic pinholes in your gut. So all the garbage from the food, all the waste, is leaking in. And sometimes what happens is proteins from bacteria and proteins from yeast also leak in. And some of these proteins look like human tissue. And in some cases, some of the bacteria, especially certain bacteria like Klebsiella and Pseudomonas, these are species of bacteria that produce proteins that look like our joints, right? So these proteins, these bacterial proteins can leak into the bloodstream through that leaky gut, being caused by the methotrexate, right? And the immune system starts to attack them because it looks at them and it says, these are foreign. But over time, what it says is, hey, these look like our joints. Let's attack the joints too because they look the same. That's molecular mimicry. So the molecules that are leaking through the leaky gut mimic the joints and they perpetuate the autoimmune response. And until you stop that gut from leaking, and whatever's causing it, whether it's a medication that you're on or whether it's, that you're eating the wrong food or plastics. Plastics can cause a leaky gut. Eating or drinking out of plastics can cause a leaky gut. So it doesn't matter what it is that you're doing. You've got to stop that process, to stop the molecular mimicry, to calm down the immune system long enough so that the joints can begin the process of healing and repairing so you can get that patient back to stable and normal. And that's what we had to do with Anne. But her story is an amazing turnaround from not functional to completely functional, and being able to be a mom and being able to do CrossFit and being able to do the things that she really wanted to do.
Adrenal dysfunction is another common thing. That's probably my number one thing that I'm talking to every patient about, especially in America. Americans are typically burning the candle at both ends, or when cortisol levels are high, it's actually forcing the liver to make more sugar. And it causes the brain to even crave more sugar, which makes sense because in a high cortisol state, that's your high stress state. And if you're running from a lion, now's not the time to eat steak and fat. Now's the time to find a sugar source so you can quickly get energy. So when we kick people into ketogenesis with adrenal dysfunction, all of a sudden the body stops being inflamed, cortisol levels come down, and really it's kind of a whole body reset. So if you're not familiar with adrenal dysfunction, most people that struggle with adrenal dysfunction have fatigue, especially the afternoon fatigue, really restless sleep, salt cravings, sugar cravings. Many of those symptoms get better almost immediately. Now, it takes months for the true adrenal dysfunction to reset, but as long as you can get symptom improvement in people at least quickly, then they're likely to believe all the other things that they need to institute.
But nutritional deficiencies can cause or trigger autoimmune disease or make existing autoimmune disease worse. So it's something that absolutely needs to be evaluated. Glyphosate, before it was a pesticide, was used as a chelating agent to strip metals. So it strips metals from the human body just as well as it strips metals from plants and weeds and kills them. So one of the metals it can rob the body of is selenium. Now selenium, one of its functions is in thyroid. And look at how many thyroid prescriptions are written in the United States alone. I mean, it's one of the top medications in the world. But selenium is necessary to convert thyroid hormone. So T4, which is inactive thyroid hormone, to be able to convert it to the active form of thyroid hormone, which is T3, requires an enzyme that is selenium driven. So if you are exposing somebody to a chelating agent that's stripping their body away of selenium, they can actually become hypothyroid. And selenium deficiency can trigger autoimmune thyroid disease.
Unfortunately, one of the solutions the medical community has developed for dealing with thyroid issues is to remove the thyroid. This extreme practice causes the patient to have to be on constant hormone replacement therapy for life with synthetic drugs that can cause other health issues. Is this really even a solution, or is it just bypassing the issue of taking the time to look at the body and figure out what is really going wrong? Functional medicine doctors and many holistic professionals have been able to see many patients with thyroid conditions be able to reverse their abnormalities and live healthy lives with little to no medication. If it's possible to overcome these conditions, then why are we using surgery and pharmaceuticals to try to either cut out the problem or patch it up with a Band-Aid?
it really comes down to if you've had your thyroid removed, like completely removed, then there's not that organ really to produce the thyroid hormones needed. And then, yeah, you get basically stuck being a lifetime customer, Synthroid, levothyroxine. Then people usually will switch to Armour. And what's interesting about Armour from a pharmaceutical manufacturing side of it, it's oftentimes made with gluten, which gluten has the molecular mimicry to actually negatively affect the thyroid. So when you're looking at what do you have to take if you're having to be on something, obviously you want to find a thyroid expert and somebody that can help really monitor your thyroid levels, give you the right stuff. But compound pharmacy, compounding things so you know what all the ingredients are important.
Many autoimmune patients are aware that allergies are often associated with their condition. However, do they really understand why? Let's get to the root cause of what causes allergies to develop and if it's possible to prevent or even reverse our allergic reactions.
So top solutions really when you're looking at the thyroid is figuring out, okay, why is the immune, like in Hashimoto case, when the immune system's actually attacking the tissue of the thyroid, why is that happening? And there's 3 big causes that I've seen: toxicity, pathogens, such as like Lyme disease and other co-infections, and then I would also throw parasites into the mix as well too. So you could put parasites in the pathogen category, but really toxicity and pathogens as a whole are big sources of why people have thyroid issues. And then you don't want to discount, you also don't want to discount diet, that certain foods that you're consuming, potentially synthetic damaging foods are actually negatively affecting the thyroid or the body actually attacking it, like gluten, the whole molecular mimicry.
So tell me about when it comes to biomimicry. Can you please explain what that is, why that's important to understand it, what it can do inside the body?
Yes. So when I'm working with a nutrition client who has Hashimoto's, so this is autoimmune attack against the thyroid gland, right, Hashimoto's, it is critical that this person become absolutely diligent about avoiding gluten, all right? We think about gluten as being an autoimmune trigger for celiac disease, where the lining of the gut is attacked by the immune system, but it's really fascinating with Hashimoto's, where the structure of the gluten molecule is almost identical to the structure of the thyroid gland tissues. So if we have been over-consuming gluten and the immune system has decided that is a threat, and every time gluten is consumed, the immune system mounts an attack to wipe out that gluten molecule. Now the immune system is going on the search, looking for every molecule of gluten in the body and scanning, and all of a sudden it finds this huge concentration of what it thinks is gluten molecules, the thyroid gland, right? And so the immune system starts attacking the thyroid gland. So in order to get the Hashimoto's attack to calm down and to minimize the damage, we've got to avoid gluten. And the thing that's astounding is the most recent research is showing that a single gluten exposure can have an immune response that lasts up to 6 months long, right? So people think, oh, I'm going to be gluten-free and protect myself, but maybe once a week I'll have pizza, right? And it's, some people's immune systems are healthier and still have a fairly normal function, and that may not be devastating to that person, but someone with autoimmunity, especially either celiac obviously, but Hashimoto's, it really has to become an all or nothing thing, right? If we're going to stop the destruction on the thyroid gland. The other thing that's fascinating is the biomimicry effect of type 1 diabetes. So there's different theories out there, right? So type 1 versus type 2. Type 1 being where the beta cells inside the pancreas are destroyed. And these are the beta cells that normally would produce insulin. When they're completely destroyed, then the body cannot produce insulin. So type 1, right? So the theories are that the beta cells in the pancreas are destroyed either by a virus or by an autoimmune attack. So there's some research now that's showing that that autoimmune tac could be linked to commercial dairy. The type of cows, the Holstein cow is the type that's usually used in commercial dairies, produces a casein that is of a variety that can stimulate that autoimmune attack. That protein structure resembles the molecular structure of the beta cells of the pancreas that produce insulin.
Great, that's awesome. Now, anything else in regard to autoimmunity or thyroid disease in particular? It sounds like you've got quite a bit of awareness on Hashimoto's. Is there anything else you would like the viewer to understand when it comes to looking at natural ways to both prevent and put Hashimoto's into remission or reverse the disease?
Other than a complete diligence in avoiding gluten, I would say the best way to manage and minimize an immune attack on the thyroid gland is to manage your overall immune health, right? That would be the same as any other type of autoimmune condition. So minimizing the stressors to your gut, packaged processed foods, sugar, alcohol, stress, right? When we are under stress, our adrenal glands are pumping out excess cortisol, if they still can, and that cortisol weakens the immunity, the SIGA, in the lining of the gut. So there's a very well-known connection between stress and weakening the lining of the gut.
Hi there, this is Jonathan here.
Hi, I'm Lori.
And I wanted you to get a chance to meet my wife, Lori, my wonderful wife. She's part of my motivation and my driving force behind what I create and what I'm a part of in life. And if it wasn't for her support and her vision alongside me, our vision together, this wouldn't be here right now. So I really appreciate you being with me on this journey, Lori. I do. And I love the heart that you have for making a difference in the world, and I just want you to have a chance to connect with everyone that's tuning in with us.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here and to meet you all, and I'm so glad that you're here. We've been reading all the comments and we've just seen how much struggles there are, and I just want you to know that we welcome you to this family, this community. I'm so excited for all that you're about to learn, and I'm just looking forward to the results that you are about to find in your own life, as we've seen countless of results in so many people. And so we're just really excited that you're going to experience a new life and a new hope, and we're just excited for you. And yeah,
that's awesome. Thank you, Lori. And what's incredible about this for me at this stage in this journey is that information is the key to success in life, in anything.
Yes.
And I'm sure you know that knowledge is power. And that's why we're taking you on this journey, because we want to fully educate you. Right now, if you have an autoimmune condition, or if you have a loved one that's suffering, maybe the thing that you're thinking is, this one particular thing, I just need answers on this. Can you help me here? And the amazing news is that everything that we're sharing with you is going to be relevant and helpful for you. When you're educated, when you have the knowledge, you have that power so that you can apply that to your unique condition. On top of that, I do have an exciting announcement as well. During the series, you're going to get our episodes each of the nights here for the 7 free episodes of this series, but you're also going to get to be a part of a question and answer where you get to submit your question and we have our experts come in and answer your particular question. So we'll get those submitted during the screening of this series. So yes, you will be able to have unique answers tailored to your unique situation. And then on top of that, your questions actually are going to be so much more educated and so much more of an effective question. Often we don't know the questions to ask because we're not educated enough. So that's why, we go through this series, you learn more, you can ask those effective questions to other peers in this group, to the experts that chime in with the comments as well. You'll see that happen. And then you'll also see the experts chiming in and answering questions. When they're answering a question of somebody else or they're dealing with another particular person, you'll find that so much of it, if not all of it, will apply to you. So I just want you to get the most out of this experience, want you to really experience the blessings that you deserve right now.
Yes, so it has all the different aspects. You're not only learning, you're learning to apply. You're going to be able to find out specific questions that you might have or that you'll learn to ask, and you'll be able to actually ask actual experts with your specific questions. So you have the whole package, and and the best thing of all is that you have that community. You have us. A lot of the times, searching for the solution to your struggles with health or emotional struggles or whatever trials that we go on in life, lots of the time you can feel alone, and you're not alone in this process. We have a functioning community where we can learn from each other, be there for one another, and I just want you to know that we are here for you. So
absolutely. Glad you're here. Glad you can have the opportunity to be a part of a new community that can help propel your success and be there for you, because we all need support when we're going through trials. The emotional trauma is often the worst part of it, because so often with all the wrong answers that we're given, hope starts getting drilled out of us every day. Every day when we hear that there's no real solution, that we'll have to be on medication for the rest of our life, that our symptoms will gradually worsen. It just is driving the hope out of people.
And even the journey when you're getting somewhere and you're learning new things, sometimes it can feel really overwhelming, and sometimes you just feel you feel like you just want to give up. But the thing is that knowledge is power. By beholding, you become changed. So learning this information, but also having people along the way, also having a community along the way that can just lift you up, and just know that step by step you're being transformed.
With the diversity of views that come up in this series, I want you to understand that you have the opportunity to overcome your unique challenges by using the protocols that are in this series. We're discussing so many amazing things, all the way from the diets that you can use to the role of parasites and bacteria and how to strengthen good bacteria and microbiome in the gut, to thought processes and the way mental health and emotional health affect our health at large, and everything in between. So you're going to learn so many amazing things, and I want you to know that with the unique things that you hear in this series, there are a diversity of things that work for people, and that was what I had to come to grips with as an investigator on this subject. I interviewed all these different people, and I worked out that some people did different diets and they got results in their lives. And so you'll see people referring to a paleo diet, you'll see people referring to diets like a vegan or a vegetarian or plant-based diets, and then you'll see that within these different dietary protocols there are some amazing things to be learned and insights that you can use and apply so you can see results for yourself. So I just want you to understand that there is a diversity there, and I want you to understand that you are in that freedom to choose what works for you, what has results for you, and what research you find to be most compelling as an effective diet for long-term success.
It's just been an amazing journey, hasn't it? Just learning all the things that we've learned, and learning that there's so much variety and so much options.
We want you to be able to use the diets that work for you, find the research that works for you. And so I want to let you know that there are ways that are proven, they're effective, they work. There's clinicians, doctors that are in this series that will share with you exactly how they did it, and you'll hear from patients that have done it. You'll hear from patients that have used other diets where they are including some meat and they're able to overcome their challenges, and then those that are going fully plant-based and are overcoming their challenges. So you'll see that diversity and you'll be able to make your choices. Dr. Bush, do you think that with thyroid disease that somebody, if they're vegetarian or vegan and they're hearing perhaps a lot of people saying, oh, I went paleo's the diet, you've got to get rid of all grains, you've got to do these things, would you say that there's another way that somebody could take on thyroid disease from a vegan or a vegetarian perspective, and would you personally see it as being as effective or better?
So if we take a look at all of the diets that are now currently being practiced and preached by everything from physicians to nutritionists to your osteopath or naturopathic doctor, all of these things have two common things in trait.
they always eliminate fake food, you know? So any diet that's ever worked to improve human health eliminates the processed foods. Get close to the food chain is the message. The second thing is they all tend to be elimination diets. And so that's probably two of the big pieces that we need to untangle. First of all, any diet that preaches whole food, real food, from Mother Nature, from Mother Earth to us, is preaching something that's positive and true. Now we can kind of tease out the discussion, is high protein good? I think that even the paleo people are increasingly recognizing, no, it's not about high protein, it's about high fat, which is a fuel, not a building block. Protein is increasingly being recognized as a very acidic, very inflammatory compound, especially if it's coming from these dense protein structures of meat and dairy. And so the vast majority of the paleo people out there will make you dairy-free anyways, and then a lot of the proteins will not be in the form of the dense meats, but will be in nuts, seeds, legumes even, and the like. And so it's those proteins there that are going to be more available to deliver some of the fats and things like that, and less dense in the acidic protein structures. So that's a little bit of that tug and pull. Let's get out of the concept that somebody's right and somebody's wrong, and let's back up and say whole real food is always important. The lower the protein, the better. The higher the fat from healthy sources, the better, and all of that. So the complex carbohydrates here are really always get a bad name right now from the paleo folks. And again, this has to do with a misperception about the source of the carbohydrate and what it does when it gets inside the body. In a healthy body, complex carbohydrates, the grains, the vegetables, the fruits, only reduce insulin levels further. They make you healthier, not less healthy. Now, if you take somebody who's been unhealthy and on an unhealthy diet for a long time, has been exposed to maybe tons of the refined sugars and artificial sweeteners and all kinds of things like that, you have a very damaged liver. Or if you perhaps are, as a consumer, have a situation where you've gained weight over time, you've been trying to eat healthy, you've been doing a lot of exercise, you've been trying to do this or that diet, maybe fasting, maybe not, all of these things, and you find yourself gaining weight over time. That is a symptom, again, of stress at the hypothalamus, the brain. The brain is making you store fat because of its perceived deficits that are coming from the information from your gut microbiome. The bacteria and fungi are talking directly to your brain, which is amazing. And then it's also forcing these stress reactions in your endocrine system, the hormones that regulate the way your cells store and burn fat. If you've been gaining fat centrally, maybe you're not obese, but you've just gained central weight in and around the abdomen, that is going to put you in a high insulin state. You've got fatty liver, you've got inflammation in the liver from the fat accumulation there. Now the carbohydrates can look like a problem. Your sugars could go up. Your blood sugar's higher when you eat carbohydrates. Well, that's true only if you are inflamed. So if you have a healthy liver that's not inflamed, you can handle a lot of adversity, you can handle a lot of carbohydrates without the insulin or blood sugar going up. So that's the misperception about what the paleo guys are saying, eliminate grains, eliminate this, eliminate all carbohydrates and everything else. That's only going to have an effect if you have inflammation inherently. So if you're going to do that, if you decide you're going to go a paleo route or something like that, make sure it's short term, because all you're doing is palliating or putting a Band-Aid on this phenomenon of fatty liver and high insulin, high glucose, because of the fact that you're just simply eliminating all the carbohydrate. And so diabetics all over the world have been told you need to stop eating carbohydrates. Well, their blood sugar might go down for a little while, but then it will start going up again because we haven't addressed the real problem, which is not carbohydrates, it's a fatty liver, it's inflammation in the body, etc. And so step one, eat real food. Step two, make sure you're reducing stress in every category so that your liver can release fat, release stress, and start to process carbohydrates in a healthy fashion. So if you feel driven to eliminate carbohydrates for symptom relief in the short run, bring them back in. Bring in those healthy carbohydrates within weeks or months to get the micronutrients and the rainbow back into your diet. Because if you've eliminated all that and all you're eating is nuts and meat, you got no color at all in your diet, which means you have no trace micronutrients that you desperately need for health and healing and total health and longevity. And so go after those micronutrients again. Bring back the vegetables and everything else. The grains, there's some colorful grains out there. You've got some of the ancient grains that are increasingly getting visibility now because they have some interesting fibers in them that have anti-cancer properties and things. But think about wild rice, red quinoa, black quinoa. Think about the hemp seeds. Think about a lot of these compounds out there that can bring in nutrients that have been rare to find in the typical Western diet.
So we really have to look at the blue zone, look at the studies, the research, and really help people understand that eating whole foods nutrition is the first step to ideal health. The second step is identified food compatibility. What is best for you as an individual? And third, what supplements will work for you to optimize? Because soils are depleted, they're not always the best, and sometimes we need added methyl donors. We need hydrogen, molecular hydrogen. We need certain things that detoxify estrogen. Dr. Edwin Lee, the famous endocrinologist, states he uses DIM, dimethyl from cruciferous vegetables like water. He uses it for all of his patients because it detoxifies the risk of cancer. It improves their thyroid condition and functions. But the reality is when you look at a book written by Brooke Goldner, Dr. Goldner stated bye-bye to lupus, and in her book Goodbye to Lupus, she points out her own personal odyssey where she had very high levels of lupus. The lab tests confirmed. She was concerned. She wanted to get pregnant. She wanted to get married, but she was just petrified because she had this horrible disease. It was debilitating to her. Her joints ached. She was fatigued. She couldn't function, and she learned about a plant-based whole foods diet, oil-free, because when you remove the oils, you get the fats from the whole nuts and seeds, avocados and olives. You really get a situation where the body's getting massive amounts of fiber, massive amounts of phytochemicals to detoxify, and all these chemicals just move right through the body, out through the digestive tract, producing more hydrogen. So it's interesting that from a biochemical standpoint, we're looking at balancing the hormones, which is partly the foods we select. We know that xenoestrogens and the meats that we eat are loaded with estrogens, for example. So now we have a whole group of people developing prostate cancer, breast cancer, because of the high consumption and the dependency on animal products as our source of protein. It's interesting that people even think they need eggs, that's the standard, the best source of protein. Even egg whites are touted as appropriate, yet we trigger worse autoimmune conditions with eggs and the foreign proteins, because like with milk and eggs, they're viewed by the body as a foreign invader, a protein antigen. So our body then sets up a system with the white blood cells to try and remove these foreign proteins, but then it starts attacking our own body proteins. So we really have to calm down the inflammation. We have to reduce the exposure of these highly inflammatory foods, namely all animal product, meat, cheese, eggs, dairy product, and we have to move towards plant whole food nutrition. Now, just taking plant whole food nutrition isn't enough. We really should understand that people selectively have individual compatibilities. So we'll do an additional test, say a ALA test, Sage medical test. There's a few that measure what's called IgG, the white blood cells response to the foods that you eat. And if we select the foods that are most compatible for you, then your body's immune system will calm down, the inflammation will reduce, and you're going to come out with, in most cases, removing or getting rid of the offending agent that caused the autoimmune condition.
So let's think about the condition of arthritis to begin with here as not just a nutritional kind of effort to get nutrient and anti-inflammatory kind of medicinal properties of your food into the joints that may be in pain or swelling. And let's back up to what is a joint's purpose. And again, we've been looking after in some of these segments here around what is your purpose as an individual, or as somebody listening to this, what is your human journey to date and how can you become more clear in that? What is the purpose of a simple joint? Maybe you have knee pain or swelling of a joint. The purpose of that joint is motion. And so that's why a biologic joint is formed, is create motion and movement in a structure. And so if you just had no knees and you just had straight bones that ran from the hips to the ankles, you would have far less mobility. You would have extreme difficulty going up a hill, let alone trying to climb some stairs or try to get over a gate in the house. You'd be very limited in your function, and you may be moving towards that limitation in function now as the joint starts to lose its purpose or function. And so when we start to ask about root cause solutions to something like the arthritis, it pays well to consider more broadly what is that joint's purpose, and therefore what are the medicinal properties that we should bring to that joint. And so in arthritis, your purpose is movement. You're losing that function and that identity of the joint. And so you have an immune condition perhaps where you're attacking or damaging that joint. In the case of autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, there's a specific antibody that's most likely formed in the intestinal lining from a leak of the intestines, and is now attacking the joint space as a vulnerable source within the body. And so when we start to think about it in that approach, we know that we need movement and motion to be part of this journey of nutrition and health return to that. And so it's important to realize that if you consume all of your food in the same seat, slumped over in the same position and in pain, and you're feeding yourself in that position that was present when you developed the arthritis, and then it's been reinforced and perhaps gotten more and more desperate in its nature since then, it's important for you to start to integrate that knowledge into the way in which you eat. It may be that you consume a fair amount of your food in the car, fast food, driving through town, or you always pack your breakfast and you eat over that, or you eat over your laptop, bent over. Think about the symmetry and movement and stabilization of your joints and body when you're in the eating and fueling process, and then especially as you go to digest that food. And so it's very important for you to work movement into your routine of getting nutrition to deliver the medicines to the joints that are in pain. And this can be very counterintuitive and very difficult to overcome pain itself, because when you move the knee, it hurts, so you tend to move it less. Well, when you move the knee less and less, it's more and more difficult for you to deliver nutrition to the joint itself. And so make movement of your problem areas, make motion part of this journey of your recovery from arthritis. And it can start in tiny little steps so that you're not overwhelming your own threshold of pain here. But think about that in regard to the nutrition. If you've now gotten in touch with your food chain, as we've encouraged you to do in this series, get closer to the earth. Know your farmer at least. Be at at your Saturday food markets or your farmers markets or your CSAs in your local community and the like. Be there and interact with those farmers. You're getting closer to that. But now that your food has medicine, make sure it gets delivered to the place it is most needed. And your body will know that if you are moving a joint that is arthritic. It will deliver more nutrient, more oxygen, more of that healing capacity and metabolism if you go ahead and move that joint shortly after eating. This doesn't mean you need to rigorously exercise. It means you may sit and do range of motion exercise with a TheraBand or something like that in the half an hour to a few hours after eating. And so that journey of directing metabolism and directing nutrition to your joint spaces in the form of arthritis is critical. And so range of motion, the simple ones here in the United States that might be more available to you, the Pilates, the egoscue therapy and things like this. So find yourself a movement practice that practices range of motion of those areas of damage and make that part of your nutritional journey. Deliver the nutrient to the gut, let the bacteria, the fungi, and the rest feed you, but make sure that the medicinals from that food end up at its target through motion itself. Very good. The journey of nutrition and its role in this kind of inflammatory autoimmune processes, things like lupus, your inflammatory arthritis conditions, your thyroid conditions, inflammatory destruction of the thyroid gland, is going to tie back to the medicinal features of the food. And so there's a couple of features of the food that are going to be important and commonly talked to, which are kind of the anti-inflammatory components, which kind of block into a couple different categories. Alkaloids are a good piece of that. And so when you're starting to think it for yourself or your family member around autoimmune disease and what should I put on the plate, think about those medicinal plants that are famous for their anti-inflammatory medicinal properties. And so that may be something like turmeric being a huge one. So curcumin is the large seed, and once ground down into the fine herb, you end up with turmeric. And it's one of the most famous of them. And so for my arthritis patients, I make turmeric a central role for the medicinal properties of bringing these alkaloids in. Huge fan of getting the mushrooms into play here. And so a lot of the mushrooms have very unique medicinals in regard to this kind of anti-inflammatory alkaloid-like kind of factor. The other ones that I reach for are going to be the cruciferous vegetables, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, broccoli. These guys are really important, bringing, again, some unique medicinal anti-inflammatory properties to the body. And so if you have an inflammatory process going on, reach for those medicinals. And then the next one you want to reach for is going to be the antioxidants. Now, antioxidants sound like they're the opposite of an oxidant, but in fact, they're just a large enzyme that chews up oxidant with its combination, if you will, with a reductant. And so an antioxidant isn't just something that blocks the oxidants or the inflammatory properties of your body's immune system or the food that you eat. They're actually these machines, these large enzymes that will chew up the inflammatory pieces that are within the body. The antioxidants are going to be rich in the fruits. And so, the dark berries are perhaps most famous for this, but your dark acai berry or the blueberries or the goji berry even, and then there's some very small blueberry-like fruits that are available in South America and the like that are getting increasingly ubiquitous on the shelves of your natural health stores. And so those compounds with the antioxidants are going to be paired with some of the medicinals or the alkaloid features of the turmerics and beyond. So think turmeric and mushrooms for kind of that medicinal feature, maybe add in your cruciferous vegetables, and then think antioxidants down this avenue of the dark fruits. And so that's kind of combining the power of both of those fruit and vegetables in that effort to reduce inflammation regardless of what autoimmune condition you might be suffering.
It's important to note that no hormone works in isolation from other hormones. They all function within a complex, subtle web of interconnectedness. Many hormones have an effect on the immune system, disease, and each other. There's little doubt that hormone imbalance can exacerbate or even induce relapses of dormant autoimmune disease. Women are afflicted with autoimmune disease at a much higher rate than men, which is a good clue that female hormone balance is involved in some way.
When somebody has autoimmunity, we know from a scientific standpoint that if you have an autoimmune condition, you going through perimenopause or menopause, or for the guy it'd be andropause, which isn't often talked about, but menopause or perimenopause, that if you have an autoimmune condition, it's going to be a rougher road, rougher journey through that. So really always looking at the body as a whole, and how can you heal yourself is an important thing, but hormones in general is big for just to feel good. So if you're deficient of estrogen, deficient of progesterone, you're converting things in the wrong manner, you can just feel like crud. You can just not feel well. And so hormones, reproductive organs, they're all connected. So if somebody's even having trouble getting pregnant, you want to look at ovaries, you want to look at uterus, you want to look at the hormone levels in the body. Hormones would be estrogen, and you want to also look at the estrogen metabolites. I generally like a dried urine test or even a 24-hour urine test, because that test is nice. I feel like it's more comprehensive than just the standard blood work, because really when you're looking at risk factors hormonal wise, if you're looking at uterine cancer, breast cancer risk, it's always the estrogen metabolite, the 4-OH, what they call the 4-OH estrogen metabolite, that then puts you at risk. Well, when you run a standard blood work for hormones, you can't actually look at the metabolites in the blood. So I like the 24-hour urine hormone, or also Precision Analytical has a test called the Dutch, and you can actually do it at home. It stands for Dried Urine Test Comprehensive Hormones. And what it'll do is it'll look basically at the whole chart of hormones. So we can look at progesterone, we can look at DHEA, we can look at testosterone, we can look at estrogen metabolites and how it's breaking down, methylation, we can look at how testosterone's breaking down, and it's really within that pathway you can have a better assessment of what's actually going on with the hormones. So assessing the hormones can help whether you're dealing with hormonal type symptoms, menopause, perimenopause, infertility issues, usually lower progesterone, it makes it a little bit tougher, for somebody to get pregnant.
One of the patients that came to see me was actually a girlfriend of a patient that's seen me for a long time. So he started dating this girl, and she was having some markers come up with her GYN exam, and the boyfriend was worried, like, hey, we need to do something else. We need to help you. And the GYN wasn't willing to help her. So, or not unwilling to help her, but wasn't able to help her. So she sits down in my office, and one of the first things she tells me is, I love sugar and I eat way too much of it, and there's not really anything you're gonna be able to do about it. She had some pre-diabetic markers, some inflammatory markers, and some mood issues that she didn't really attribute to her sugar cravings, but as Snickers likes to make popular, the hangriness, the being hungry and being grumpy is a very real thing, and it's a hormonal imbalance. Whether it be insulin or estrogen or whatnot, those hormones are constantly feeding into each other. High insulin states always lead to high estrogen states in females, and high estrogen states are very irritating to the brain. They're kind of inflammatory to the brain, and people are more likely to get migraines. They're more likely to have mood irritation, anxiety, heavy periods, or PMS. And basically she came in at the 3 or 4 week mark and said, I don't have any more sugar cravings, I've lost weight, I came off of birth control, and my mood is more stable, I didn't have a massive period, everything's working better. And she's still seeing us, and it's been probably 6 months. One of the most powerful things to her was that she didn't have the sugar cravings that she initially came to me on, that she thought she was just born with. She thought she was going to have those sugar cravings the rest of her life and not really be able to tackle them. So both her and her boyfriend were pleasantly surprised that she was able to reset her metabolism and have a healthier life.
Hormonal imbalance, what would you speak to that when it comes to its causes and dietary and lifestyle treatments and preventions?
So hormonal imbalance is ultimately one of the most sensitive events that happens when you are starting to slide towards an inflammatory, namely a chronic inflammatory state. The first major hormone that tends to shift is going to be insulin. And so as inflammation goes up, so does your insulin level. As insulin goes up, it screws up the way in which your testes or ovaries or adrenal glands make a lot of your sex hormones that also go hand in hand with your anti-inflammatory hormones, things like cortisol. And so these compounds are going to be dictated by your relative insulin state. And so this is where your nutrition becomes very important. Carbohydrates don't make insulin go up in and of themselves. Inflammation makes carbohydrates become insulin positive or pro-inflammatory. And so if you add high carbohydrate diet to an inflamed, damaged liver from a history of crappy diet, then you're going to have a pro-insulin kind of sugar type injury. But however, if you keep eating a clean, healthy, carbohydrate-rich, plant-based diet over time, insulin levels actually drop rather than go up. It's because the liver is getting healthier and healthier. The chronic inflammation state is dropping very quickly. So there's some great resources out there that you can read if you want to dive more into this kind of non-intuitive situation where the plant carbohydrates in the fruits and vegetables will actually reverse diabetes. And that seems totally counterintuitive, but it comes down to the reality that insulin only becomes toxic if it's elevated due to chronic inflammation, not in use because you're eating healthy carbohydrates. So that's the big misperception we have around sugar from plants and vegetables. Those healthy fruits and vegetables that are coming with high carbohydrates are matched with fibers that will deliver those sugars in a volume and a rate through the small intestine and colon that are acceptable to the digestion and metabolism of them, and they will not raise insulin levels if they're digested in a whole food capacity and in a non-inflamed state. And so as you eat healthy, whole foods, your liver is going to get cleaner and cleaner, and this is where the power of fasting comes in. If you want to speed this process up, drop insulin quicker, fast. Every religion on earth has told us to fast in its structure because it does clean up the situation both physically and spiritually. It cleans the static up so that we can hear purpose and intention and self better in that journey. So think low on the food chain, plants and vegetables, fruits and veggies, and then think low inflammation state, fasting if necessary to reset the immune system, drop the inflammatory state, and then add lots of healthy micro and macronutrients in the plant-based diet.
Excellent. And Dr. Bush, is there anything you'd like to say to...
In order for you to know whether you have hormone issues or not, you really just need to run a test. I like the Dutch hormone. It's pretty inexpensive. You can do it at home. And then it's going to monitor your hormones, and it's going to look at progesterone. It's going to look at DHEA. It's going to look at testosterone. And when we're looking at the pathway, understand that pregnenolone kind of sits at top. So there's a hormone called pregnenolone, and then above that actually is cholesterol. So where we always say cholesterol is like the bad guy, cholesterol is the precursor to hormones. So if you want to, increase your risk of cancer and you want to increase your risk of having low hormones, lower your cholesterol as much as you can. And that's sarcasm to not do that, right? So pregnenolone's at the top. Pregnenolone's a very smart hormone. It'll either pick to go into progesterone or it'll go into DHEA. So it kind of has that potential to pick and choose. So there's people that will take pregnenolone just to kick the whole pathway in gear. There's people that'll just take progesterone as well. There's people that'll just take DHEA, testosterone. There's kind of a whole slew to it. But essentially, we've got pregnenolone at top, that'll split into progesterone. And then the other pathway is a big pathway. So we've got DHEA, pregnenolone will go to DHEA, that'll go then to testosterone. And if your testosterone is low, you can have very low sex drive, very common in chronic illness. That's one of the first things that disappears, is that sex drive when you know the body's not doing well, hormones immediately shift gears. So you've got pregnenolone, DHEA, testosterone, and then that testosterone will actually break down into what they call the alpha beta, and you want to make sure you know that pathway is breaking down properly. So like for instance, you know, a guy's not at risk of like prostate cancer or something. But testosterone will then turn into, basically get converted into estrogen. And this is kind of the danger of testosterone, you know, taking, is when you take testosterone, you're basically taking something that's going to turn into estrogen too. So you have to be very careful on the hormone side. There's a massive issue with fertility. I mean, when you actually look at research, men's sperm counts are at an all-time low. And when you take a step back and you think about, okay, having a child, getting pregnant, you know, male and female, obviously it takes to get pregnant, and actually look at from, you know, how the body was designed, you have to be healthy enough to bear a child. So when somebody starts having a quote unquote chronic illness, one of the first things that disappears is your sex drive, because if the body's not well, the body doesn't want to reproduce, right? The body is trying to survive in the moment. But look at what's happening right now in our culture, Jonathan. Glyphosate is everywhere. Where we think, oh, I'm buying organic, I'm not exposed to it. Glyphosate's in the rainwater. You know, we share one atmosphere on this earth, that when somebody sprays in one area, we share it all over the place. Glyphosate's a huge one for affecting toxicity in general, will bring down sperm levels. But what does everybody carry around in their hand or in their pocket all day so they can stay connected to the world, right? Cell phones. Like and where do guys or dudes put their phone? Right in their pocket, front pocket or back pocket, like right next to their giblets, right next to their prostate. I mean, these are these reproductive sex organs that need to, you know, make sperm, which is usually a 90-day life cycle. So if somebody's not healthy, for them to get pregnant, it's tougher because the body is saying, we gotta deal with you first before we're all of a sudden gonna have a child. So clinically, I see fertility way down. You know, people being able to be fertile and have children, which of course then the industry, the fertility industry, right, or infertility industry, I guess you would call it, of trying to artificially inseminate and things like that. People, I mean, that industry is booming right now.
Is infertility at an all-time high in this country?
I think so, and I think statistically it appears to be at an all-time high, and 50% of it is labeled unexplained. And what I've discovered just in my practice is that the unexplained aspect of it is very similar to all the other conditions that present, you know, in my practice.
And so are you seeing people get pregnant when they do the right protocol?
Yeah, so I didn't even finish that. So what happens is we fill in the gaps. We fill in the nutritional gaps. We actually, you know, help their bodies get rid of excess toxins, which end up, you know, going on to the unborn child if they remain. We fix or help support pathways that are genetically determined that are inefficient, you know, with simple micronutrient repletion, like giving people certain micronutrients that help, you know, biochemical pathways that are hindered operate more effectively. And then I look at subtle hormone imbalances that are not things that are picked up in the fertility world because they're a lot more subtle, but they're collectively enough to create that message that says, no, not right now, right? That's, the whole system's skewed to a direction that is not optimally functional. So if you restore all these pieces, you give new information, the body's able to reorganize itself in a way that's optimal and healthy, it does what it was evolutionarily designed to do, which is reproduce. You know, that's like part of our biological imperative. Like, we're born to be able to do that. It's only all this other impact has gotten in the way, that if you can address it and correct it, allows for that process to happen again, normally.
And you've seen it?
Over and over and over again.
So tell me what kinds of cases. Like
like one that most comes to mind, just because she delivered a few months ago, was a woman in her early 40s. She worked for a good, couple of years, and her case was really interesting too, because there were not so obvious signs even in this other paradigm, but when we dug underneath it, there's lab evidence of immune dysregulation that hadn't yet become symptomatic. But on a biological level, which I kind of separate from the cognitive level, there was enough imbalance that her body was knowing that it needed to negotiate and navigate that process even before she manifested symptoms. And she had gone through various fertility treatments and been unsuccessful, and had no real diagnosis as to why. It was in that unexplained group. And we peeled back the layers bit by bit. She worked really hard, in terms of just, I guess, even like sort of trusting the process, because the thing that actually, sort of threw things off initially was that she didn't have very many symptoms that we would typically see of this, of this objective data. But when we addressed it and corrected it, she conceived naturally, all on her own in her, at age 41, and went on to have a really healthy pregnancy and, a really sweet little baby boy.
No problems.
No problems. So just like those stories happen over and over again.
So if somebody's having fertility issues, if they're having autoimmune struggles, you still need to deal with the upstream sources to get the body well. And when the body heals, it heals, everything heals. It doesn't pick and choose, I'm just gonna heal the shoulder now and everything else will wait. It's like, no, when the body heals, it heals. And when the body is healthy, it's ready to give birth or to procreate, right? To have offspring. And that's really the goal, is let's get the body overall healthy. So instead of, okay, you're not fertile, you've been trying, for 8 years to try to get pregnant, now you're going to a clinic. It's like, well, in that time, has anything been done overall to actually help your health, to actually improve your overall health? And that's the shift I believe we need to make, is not, using a treatment to try to get pregnant, but to look at overall body health. And if we improve the health, I think fertility issues will diminish, and, obviously people will be more fertile.
Because most of the people I see come to me after they've failed traditional treatment. They failed the convention. They're not conceiving through all the other fertility methods that they've been trying, right? That they've been spending thousands of dollars on. So, and it's because we're smart. Our bodies are smart.
This is moving for you, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Why is it moving for you?
A couple of reasons. One is that, as opposed to trying to force something into being that is, going against an intelligent biological process, right? So, if we look at things like IUI or IVF, I feel like you're trying to trick the body into overcoming a really elegant, message that it's putting out, and trying to force something that's just not, reasonable, as opposed to actually providing the building blocks and removing the barriers that allow it to unfold and find this beautiful state of balance and being that allows for these natural processes to occur normally. And at the end of it, you get a new life. You get a new you get a baby. There's nothing better than that.
And you've seen that happen with more people than that woman?
Almost universally, every single person I've worked with, if they are committed to the process, they all get pregnant and have healthy pregnancies and have healthy babies. Wow. So over and over and over and over again. So,
really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say statistically, 80+%. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then that 20%.
They gave up.
I was gonna ask that.
Yeah, they gave up.
Did they give up?
They didn't commit to the process. They maybe, dipped their toe in, or maybe they went a little bit further than that. But, sometimes course correcting takes, it's peeling back the onion, right? It's peeling back the layers. So if the initial layer wasn't enough, there's more work to do. Right? Sometimes the initial layer is plenty, and the body is able to self-correct just by addressing that piece. But sometimes the impact is deeper than that, and you have to go deeper than that and look at some of these other more nuanced impact points and undo them. Right?
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And then considering then the other 20%, if they all had fully applied themselves and not given up, then
there's nothing to biologically indicate that they wouldn't be successful. Right? We still had evidence of, even objective evidence of imbalance, where, a conventional doctor might look at it and say they don't see anything, but I'm looking at, fine tuning and optimizing and allowing, this orchestration of really complex processes to work together. Well, the first message that people get is, you're this age and you've been trying this long. There's an equation for that, and the equation says you have to go do this right away. You have to do this intervention right away, or you'll never have a baby. And then the intervention fails, at least 4 times out of 5. Or 8 times out of 10, right? The statistics, or less than that, right? Every round of IVF has about a 16% success rate. And so then they're told, well, you just have to keep doing it. Right? But the initial message is, this equation says that it can't happen unless you do this. And then there's fear, and there's disempowerment, and then there's all of that impact. I mean, we know even from even data-wise, the number of women who have early pregnancy loss, their cortisol levels compared to women who maintain pregnancy is 30% of women who maintain pregnancy have excess cortisol levels, and 90% of women who have early pregnancy loss have excess cortisol levels. And that's like stress, right? You're saying this can't happen unless you do this, and they feel broken. They feel like there's something seriously wrong, and only this technology can make it happen. And that's not always so much the case. I mean, how many rounds is that? 5 or 6 to get to 100%. That's a lot.
And stress is inevitable when hope is lost.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the major points of success that I have is that instilling that hope and giving them the insight that they can get better is what makes them partly of what makes them successful. It's not even so much the protocols are helpful, but it's the idea that they're able to that actually allows them to succeed, to resolve their health.
What's a few things that somebody could do that was wanting to fall pregnant? What's a couple of things that they could assess as being triggers that are causing infertility, and a couple of things that they could start doing that would help their body to be a great nurturer of new life?
Yeah, so I would go back to what are the sources, right? What are the underlying sources of your health issues, and address those and deal with them. Toxicity is a big epidemic. Pathogens like Lyme and co-infections and parasites are a big epidemic. So remove the toxin, clear out the bad pathogen, body has a healthy environment. Now on the other side of it,
what about EMFs?
Oh, EMFs are a huge category. So EMF, or it's really the technical term we'd say is EMR, electromagnetic radiation, is more of the scientific research category. EMF is still a popular buzzword, but cell phones around you, Wi-Fi on, Bluetooth. I mean, literally in my house about a year and a half ago, I had an EMF guy come in and analyze it. And in my office alone, I had the Wi-Fi router, which had 2 different Wi-Fi signals, like 2.4 and 5 gigahertz or something. And he looked at it, because I'm in a little 1,200 square foot place. you've been there. Pretty small house, and he's like, this is an industrial router for like this tiny house. I'm like, yeah, but it's fast, you know, because I like technology. So I had this router about 6 feet from my head. I had a Sonos Wi-Fi speaker right next to that. In the closet, I had a printer that was Wi-Fi. I had my laptop, which was connected Wi-Fi, even though I was right next to the router. I then had that on a stand, so it's ergonomic, right? So I'm not like hunched over. But then I had a wireless keyboard and mouse, which was Bluetooth. So I had Bluetooth on, Wi-Fi on. He came in with the meters in my office. He has like three different settings. He turned it all the way down, and he's like, Dr. J, it still says off the chart. I can't even get a number. It's so high in here. And I started thinking, I'm like, is that why I get tired? Like by 4 or 5 o'clock at the end of the day, like this, electromagnetic radiation that's just constantly stressing me out. And sure enough, it's a hard switch, when you say get rid of Wi-Fi, get rid of Bluetooth, get rid of the wireless thing, because wireless is so convenient, right? There's not wires everywhere. But when we did that in our house, we made a decision after he came in with meters. I'm like, okay, we got to do it. Immediately, my daughter started sleeping through the night. Our house was peaceful. Like it immediately changed the environment. And it was at that point, I'm like, you know what? EMFs, EMR, electromagnetic radiation is a big issue. And it's a big stressor for somebody trying to get pregnant too. So at minimum, shut your Wi-Fi router off at night. You can go get one of those Christmas light timers or like a fish tank, light timer where it turns it on every morning at, 8 a.m. or shuts it off at night, every night at 10 p.m. I think that's a first starting spot, for you listening. Just go get a timer, shut it off at night minimum. But the long-term picture is let's get rid of the wireless technology, because anything that transmits wirelessly is creating electromagnetic radiation, which then is just another stressor. It's another thing to fill our buckets up, to more likely to tip and cause autoimmune issues, to cause, all kinds of different things in our body. And it's really cool if you actually Google EMF or even EMR and Kirlian photography, you can actually see what Wi-Fi looks like from a photograph. It's actually pretty scary when you actually see it. Because when you can't see EMFs or EMR, you're like, oh, it's not a big deal, right? I got my phone in my pocket. Yeah, whatever, Dr. J, I'm moving on. But it's these stressors that they tip the bucket, And if you're somebody struggling right now, like, you have to remove those stressors to get well. Like, remove them, and I promise you will heal faster from that.
Lupus, again, one of these moments when we have to look beyond the question of nutrition here. And so nutrition is really not an end in of itself. All it is delivery system for fuel and building blocks for a healthy body. The thing that tears you apart in lupus is this connective tissue starting to be the target. Connective tissue is starting to increasingly be recognized as the space in which emotion and memory lies. That's pretty interesting. That's a paradigm shift for us now. If you have lupus, I want you to start thinking, I need to focus in on my emotional and memory state. What have I stored in my body and where? The where is pretty simple. Where do you have symptoms? Where is it? Dry eyes? Is it dry mouth? Is it sores on the skin? Is it rashes? What are your symptoms in this complex syndrome of lupus? There's where you're storing negative energy in the form of emotion or emotion-laden memory. So think here again, movement. We've talked about this with arthritis. If you start moving the joint, the thing that is most bothering you, you will see health and healing return quicker. In lupus, you need to zero in on what is the emotional trauma, what is the emotional memories that have been deposited in your areas of symptoms, and detox that. How do you do that? Movement is powerful. Think myofascial therapy here. It's a deeper variant of massage. This is where you're not trying to move the muscles and everything. You're actually, through often very gentle touch, trying to open up the space in which your connective tissue, the planes in which are damaged by lupus, are able to breathe and flow and start to detox and clear out the toxins. Not the physical toxins only, but actually the emotional toxins that may lay there. A good myofascial therapist is going to take you on a big emotional detox. You're going to find yourself bawling for no apparent reason in the midst of a therapy because you suddenly released a trapped emotion and memory, some physical or emotional trauma that's tied up in that space. So if you have symptoms of lupus, you likely have multiple targets: eyes, mouth, skin, maybe joints as well, you need to go after those spaces with a myofascial therapist or a motion code therapist, or somebody's going to help get at that level. Because again, if stress is high, insulin's going to be high, and no matter what you eat can become inflammatory at that point. And so to get that low insulin state, that low stress state, you need to unburden that emotional trauma.
And his look on his face was different. There was something different about it. He said, I want you to sit down. And I was like, Doc, look, don't feel bad. You can tell me whatever you want. You know, I'm like, honestly, I don't mind. And he goes, no, this one might hurt a little bit more. And I was like, what, you know? And he put his hand on my arm, and I knew it was something different. And he said, I just want you to know with some of the results, you'll probably never be able to have children. And for me, that was like, life stopped. I had absolutely no reason to live at that point. And I remember leaving there, and I was in a fog, and you know, everything felt like I was moving in slow motion. And I went home, and I turned around and I went and checked myself into a hotel, and I had paid 6 days in advance so that I was clear I was leaving this planet and I was going to do what I needed to do. And I didn't want anybody to find me because I didn't want to get back in the hospital. And so I went in, you know, checked in, and I went to go do what I was going to do to take my life. And for some reason, I had this desire to kind of say goodbye to the world. And I got on my knees, I started saying goodbye to my family, and I had this like vision, this cloud, and I could see my family talking about it. And I saw my dad telling my sister, who's my best friend, and I saw my sister just start weeping, and I started weeping. And then I saw my sister tell my nieces, and just watching what they had to go through, I was in absolute, you know, agony and tears, and I was just weeping, and that stress actually sent me into a coma. So the very thing I thought was going to take my life ended up saving my life. And I woke up the next morning, and I always joke that the first thing I said was, I was like, I hope heaven doesn't look like a hotel room, because where am I and what happened, you know? And when I realized I was here, I had this overwhelming sense, like the Incredible Hulk. It just filled my body of, this is not how my body is meant to be. There has to be an answer, and I'm not stopping until I find it. And at that moment is when I declared that I'm going to help other people once I conquer this, and I was going to conquer it. So that warrior theme, you know, came over me. What took me 7 years to figure out, I ended up healing myself, and I have a beautiful 10-year-old little girl now. And so that was my, you know, proverbial finger to the, like, don't tell me I can't have a kid, you know, kind of thing. So, you know, really, when I learned that how the body actually heals anything and everything, I realized that people need a system.
What a benefit it's been to learn more about how our hormones are affected by our diet, and how hormone imbalances are the root cause of many autoimmune disorders, especially thyroid malfunction. We hope that you can take some of the things that you've learned from this episode and start making changes today in your own life that can benefit your health. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I hope it's been a huge blessing in your life. Now, if you're feeling that this is a powerful resource that you'd like to own, then you can do that by clicking the link below. I just want to tell you that when you choose to support our mission by owning this series, not only are you supporting us to continue getting this message into the world so we can keep serving you, bringing you new series, and also supporting charities that are meaningful, like the ones that we're doing in Kenya with helping people that are on the brink of starvation, and with Eyes for India, with restoring eyesight to the blind. Not only are we able to do these things, but most importantly, you're able to have a resource in your home to help your family, to help your loved ones, and to be able to give these resources around, share them with your loved ones for many years to come, right? So it's such a powerful tool. This information isn't something that you can get anywhere, and that's why we felt the need to create it. So if you've been blessed, then consider owning the series today, because you can make a special saving during our early bird discount. So you can take that today and then get all the exciting bonuses that come with it, and continue to use this tool to bless your life, to bless the lives of others, to help people that are facing autoimmune conditions, or help the people that want to simply prevent disease and not be a part of the statistics. You're fully covered by a 60-day money-back offer, no questions asked, so you can just try it out today and see if you love it, and then make the decision from there. So thank you so much for watching this episode. Thank you so much for being on this journey. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you for your consideration of support of our mission and your health. So thank you. Our mission in the world is to alleviate suffering. That includes disease, people suffering from lifestyle diseases that are being caused by things that are in this environment, in our food, and the lack of education that we have had in approaching diet. And so our mission is to put an end to that suffering. That suffering includes people that are going without food altogether. That suffering includes people that have been taken and abducted and used for things that are unspeakable. And we're into making a difference and making an impact and helping to be a part of the solution in these ways. So through this series, you'll see us sharing some of our mission in other parts of the world to help alleviate suffering, to help bring food to the hungry. And that's an amazing, beautiful journey. And I think the biggest thing that I want to just include with that right now is when you're thinking about getting healthy and getting well, remember to think of others. Remember to think of others that are suffering, perhaps even more than ourselves, or whatever the extent, people are suffering. And sometimes when our minds can go into that place and think about this, the horrors that people go through and experience, and then we become a part of that solution, we give our time, we give our energy, a thoughtful word, we give some of our finances to help a meaningful cause, then what we're doing is we're really standing for ourselves and our own health, because I've seen it. I just got back from a clinic a couple of days ago, and it was a clinical doctor brought it up with me. We always find that our patients that do giving things during the program that they're in with us, they're the ones that are getting better results, because which I thought was just heartwarming, and because it is a mental health and emotional, psychological decision when we choose to step outside of ourselves, think of others.
So it's not only just a small little community, we have become a community amongst ourselves, but it's actually a broader community, an international community. And so I'm just really excited that you get to be part of this, as we've just been excited to just bring value to you and to the world, to different lives that would never have been touched had we not embarked on this journey. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, so we've been hearing your stories, we've been listening to these things, and over time we'll get to know you more, and so we can actually start to have that personal interaction that will happen. It doesn't happen on day one, because we have over 100,000 people that have come into this, right? But we have an amazing team, some people that are volunteering, some people that are dedicating their time because of the support that we receive through individuals that come behind us and help support us to get this message out. And there'll be opportunities that you'll have to help support this mission as well. But right now, I just want to let you know that we're grateful that you're here. We're grateful that we can be a part of the solution, and that all things are possible. All things are possible, and that you can be set free.
Yes. And I just want you to know one other thing. It's not just for your family members. I just want you to know that you are worthy. You are loved. You are important in this world. You have a unique, let's say, fingerprint. Every fingerprint is different. Every life has a specific purpose unique to yourself that no one else in this entire world will have. And we don't want you to miss out on that. We want you to be able to live it out. And we want you to know that you are important, uniquely important.
We care about you. We're glad you're on this journey, and we look forward to connecting with you again.
We love you.
Tell us what it feels like.
To starve is very painful. It leads to wasting of the body the way it is. It is just like waiting for death.
Oh, okay. mother of this baby is dead, and the mother died from starvation, malnutrition, and her body was not able to handle having this child and being able to breastfeed, and there was not enough food for the both of them. This child is alive, but the mother is dead, and this child is severely malnourished. This baby is 4 months old, but these legs are so skinny, tiny little legs. He's Hey. What does it feel like to go without food?
The body becomes weak. She cannot sleep. She cannot concentrate. She becomes very weak. And she feels a burning sensation inside her stomach.
What did she say? What did she say?
They are not sick. It is only starvation. Okay, it is okay. Trying